All right, it's time for Bible study, and today is, let's see now, the sixth day of, is it the sixth day or the ninth day? Sixth day of September, and the 10th day of Elul, 2015. And we are, of course, getting much closer now to the Feast of Tabernacles and the holy month of Tishri, which is, now I can say it's right around the corner. It won't be long now. And we'll be celebrating the feast and the high holy days. And of course the next blood moon eclipse comes up during the Feast of Sukkot this year, which may be very significant. And we know that these blood red moons have been significant in a sense because they have gone along with great events in the history of Israel. There was a tetrad of blood red moons in 1948, 1950, which was the time when Israel became a nation, which was May 1948. Then the blood red moons actually were in 49 and 50. Then in 1967, the Six-Day War was fought when Israel conquered the surrounding territories and lands and reoccupied the Golan Heights and the west bank of the Jordan River and the Temple Mount and eastern Jerusalem. 1967. And there were more blood red moons during that time, in 1968 and 69, I think it was. And now we're having blood red moons this year and next year. Another tetrad. So what's going to happen this time? Well, Pastor Mark Biltz has done some research in that area and has kind of captured the attention of the Christian world, because he studied down through history that these blood red moon tetrads have occurred during significant world events. In 1492, for example, when King Ferdinand and Queen Isabel expelled the Jews from Spain, there was a tetrad of blood red moon eclipses. And that's also the year when Columbus set sail to discover the New World in 1492. Columbus sailed the ocean blue and found America. And he thought it was India, but it was really America, but that's why the occupants are called Indians. Kind of strange anomaly. But now we're coming up at this year, 2014, 2015, and we're running into another tetrad of blood red moons. But now this year, this time is tying in with a lot of other prophecies, and I think when you put the weight all together and the convergence lines of what's happening in the world around us, that this will probably be the most significant signs of the times and signs in the heavens tying in with Bible prophecy that we've ever seen, that's ever occurred. So we're going to cover that, God willing, in our Bible study today, and what we can expect and look forward to. But I have a few fun facts here for you before we get into that, although it all ties in peripherally. The first fun fact is Obama fact number 301. File this away in your personal computer. For every one job created under the Obama administration, 75 more people went on food stamps. So every new job was followed by 75 people, I guess, who lost their jobs or at least went under the poverty level and went on food stamps. That's in Facebook. Then another cartoon illustration of a woman is standing in a line with a grocery basket and says to herself, I hope someday to be able to afford a new iPhone, like the girl in front of me with all the food stamps. The way to get ahead in today's world is to get on food stamps. I guess that's the motto. Then another van says, President Obama, if the health care plan is so great, why does it exempt you and Michelle, Congress, and the Senate, and all their families? Now, I think that's a good one. Why are they exempted, and the rest of us are forced to have this Obamacare, which really ought to be named Obama Doesn't Care, or Obama Don't Care. It's Obamacare for illegal aliens. And then I think the last one here is the most interesting. It's so let's get this straight. Let me get this straight. If you cross the North Korean border illegally, you get 12 years of hard labor. If you cross the Afghanistan border illegally, you get shot. 2 Americans just got 8 years for crossing the Iranian border illegally. If you cross the U.S. border illegally, you get a job, a driver's license, food stamps, a place to live, health care, housing, child benefits, education, and a tax-free business for 7 years. No wonder we're a country in debt. And the border, the south border between the U.S. and Mexico now is wide open. And somebody just crossed the border dressed up as an ISIS terrorist. And they got through okay. No one stopped them. Then there's something that's happened in the news which I just have to scratch my head about this past week. You know, a few weeks ago I was telling you how Joan Rivers had made the comment after performing a homosexual wedding in New York, and she was boarding an airplane, and the CNN newsman came up to her to get some comments about this historic breaking event and the wedding that she just performed, and she sort of said, well, that's no big deal. She said, and the man said, well, you think we'll soon get a first homosexual president? And she said, what do you mean? We already have one, Obama. And then she said his wife is a tranny. And he said, what? What do you mean by that? Well, what was that? And she said, you know, a transgender. But it doesn't matter, she said. You know, everything goes today, so she just passed it off and got on the airplane. Well, I wonder if that kind of hit a few people very bad, touched a raw nerve, a real sore point, because everybody began to take out after Joan Rivers, and the accusations were flying back and forth, and the video of this encounter went viral, and millions of people saw it, I'm sure, and it made people start wondering and start thinking. Of course, the White House was mum and didn't say anything and covered it up, tried to ignore it. But isn't it funny that this comedian, 81 years old, just went in for very minor throat surgery, very minor, and her heart stopped beating, and she died, asphyxiated. Now they're doing an autopsy, I believe, but, you know, it's very strange, very mysterious. A very minor surgery, and then all of a sudden her heart just stopped beating. Very, very strange, if you ask me. Well, apparently I'm not the only one. A lot of people also think that's very strange. And on Infowars.com, it says, Joan Rivers dead 2 months after calling Obama gay, Michelle a tranny. Paul Joseph Watson spoke about this on a YouTube and appeared to sound rather sarcastic. It was interesting YouTube. And the article says, comedian Joan Rivers has died just 2 months after calling President Obama gay and Michelle Obama a transsexual, prompting a deluge of conspiracy theories. Upon hearing the news of Joan Rivers' death, Alex Jones filed this eulogy report of the controversial comedian and the dangers of elective surgery. Well, others point out that, you know, in the Cold War period, the CIA has developed techniques to cause heart attacks which cannot be detected later by medical investigation. They develop drugs and techniques which will just cause a person's heart to seize up, and then there's no evidence afterwards. So, you know, funny things go on in the White House and around the White House, and strange things have been happening ever since World War II and the reigns of Richard Milhouse Nixon and John F. Kennedy and his assassination, and Lyndon Baines Johnson and Ronald Reagan and George Bush, and the CIA's rise to power in the U.S. from the time of George Bush on through today, and drug running through the airport in Mena, Arkansas, under the hand of the CIA and the U.S. government, and now the Obama administration, which I call the Abomination administration. Things are just getting more and more dubious and questionable about government and leadership, and this new world order that they're trying to bring in from the time of George Bush, Herbert Walker Bush Sr., and William Clinton, and now Barack Obama. And I heard this past week that Obama said, and I haven't double checked this yet, but he said the New World Order is here. You know, that we now have the New World Order. Well, I would like to verify that. But the world, I don't know if it's a New World Order or a New World falling apart. You look at the strife and violence, torturing the Middle East, and our ally Israel, surrounded by Arab mayhem and chaos, and ISIS on the march throughout the Middle East, and President Obama doesn't appear to know what to do about it. He says we don't have a strategy yet. He wants to try to contain it, but there's no strategy. And he admitted that publicly. Well, in other news, it appears that ISIS now, with their new carved-out nation, incorporating part of Syria and the northwestern part of Iraq, is now starting up a new air force. They actually captured a Syrian airfield with jet fighters and their pilots, and now they're starting up a new air force with more jet fighters. And in Libya, Al-Qaeda and ISIS terror groups have gone even further and captured about, I think it's 11 Boeing jet aircraft superliners. And the worry is that as 9/11 approaches this year, these terrorists may use some of those Boeing jets to do what they did in 2001 and fly them into buildings and bring about a repetition of 2001. Says another article, as 9/11 approaches, the anniversary of 9/11, the warning system is blinking red again. The world's warning systems are blinking red. Well, and in another article, an expert, ex-CIA official says Obama switches sides on the war on terror. In an explosive charge, the one that puts the president's motives into question, a former CIA agent bluntly told WorldNet Daily that America has switched sides in the war on terror under President Obama. Claire Lopez was willing to say what only a few, I guess, are willing to acknowledge. Look at the facts of how the U.S. has supported the Muslim Brotherhood in the Middle East and their overthrow of Gaddafi in Libya, and Mubarak in Egypt, and their attempt to overthrow Bashar Assad in Syria. And we sent them weapons and gave them training in Jordan. And instead of fighting our wars for us as a proxy, they've gone rogue. They've gone independent. And they've attacked Iraq and seized out a chunk of northern Iraq and Syria. And they call themselves the Islamic State or the Islamic Caliphate. Another article says ISIS attack coming in Texas. Watchdog warns about activity in Mexico, near El Paso, and the Texas border. Judicial Watch issued this warning based on intelligence that the group has been operating in Mexican border cities, that ISIS is preparing to invade America across the Mexican border. Well, that's pretty scary if you really allow yourself to think about it, because these people mean business. Look at all the hundreds and thousands of beheadings they've been conducting in the Middle East and Iraq and in Syria. They've been beheading children and women and elderly men and blindfolding and just shooting others in the back of the head and dumping their bodies down deep chasms. It's like a mass burial in hell. And alarms are now sounding for an imminent attack on the U.S. by terrorists. The U.S. government itself is warning that a terror attack is imminent on the border between Texas and Mexico, according to Judicial Watch. The group said its sources say the Middle East terrorist army, ISIS, is now operating in the Mexican city of Juarez, which is the narcotics trafficking center just across the border from El Paso, Texas. ISIS, the sources say, is planning to attack the USA with car bombs or improvised explosive devices, IEDs, carried by vehicles. Another intelligence nightmare says U.S. intelligence officials are alarmed about Americans who went overseas to Syria to fight alongside the Islamic State of ISIS against the Syrians, and now they are beginning to return to the U.S. and to Europe, and they may be bringing back the revolution and the terrorism back into our country. And they are American citizens and have American passports. So who's going to be suspicious and who's going to stop them? The Islamic State of ISIS is on the march, as I said, already, and is now vowing to reach Palestine and kill the barbaric Jews. They've risen up from the fog of war in Syria and Iraq in recent months and drawn attention from the whole world with their major victories on both sides of the Euphrates River, and have claimed swaths of territory for their declared caliphate. And this is a very sobering warning from the king of Saudi Arabia. The Saudi king warns that the Western world, including the United States, will be the jihadists' next target. Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia has warned that the West will be the next target of the jihadists, ISIS, sweeping through Syria and Iraq, unless there is a rapid action, he said. If we ignore them, I am sure they will reach Europe in a month, and America in another month, he said. This is on Saudi Arabian television, and he said terrorism knows no border, and its danger could affect several countries outside the Middle East. Will we be the target of ISIS within the next 2 months? That's about the Feast of Tabernacles time, this fall and next blood red moon. Will there be another attack, a growing attack? Will they use some of these jetliners? You know, we are headed into a very dangerous period of world history, perhaps the most dangerous that's ever existed. In fact, you stop and think about it, isn't that the very words of Jesus Christ in Matthew chapter 24, verse 21? Matthew 24, Christ said in verse 21, speaking of the time before his second coming, he says, "For then there will be great tribulation, such as has never existed since the beginning of the world, until this very time, nor shall ever be again. And unless those days were cut short, or shortened, no flesh on earth would be saved alive. But for the elect's sake, the sake of God's own people, those days will be cut short." He's talking about the day staring us in the face. The very same day Daniel talked about in Daniel chapter 12, verse 1, where it says, "And Michael shall stand up, the great prince, who stands watch over the sons of your people. And there shall be a time of trouble in the world, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that very same time. And at that time," he says, "your people, the elect, shall be delivered," the ones Christ called the elect, "everyone who is found written in the book. A time of trouble such as never has been." And Jeremiah chapter 30 corroborates this warning. Jeremiah says in chapter 30 verse 7, "Alas, for that day is great, so that none is like it, none compares to it. It is the time of Jacob's trouble, distress, tribulation, but he shall be saved out of it." It's going to come to pass, but he will be saved out of it. And then the book of Habakkuk, if I can find the book of Habakkuk here, right before Zephaniah. In chapter 2, verse 1, the prophet says, "I will stand my watch and set myself on the rampart and watch to see what he will say to me and what I will answer when I am corrected. And the Lord answered me and said, Write the vision and make it plain on tablets, that he may run who reads it." You know, he may run for his life, seek refuge, find a place of safety. "For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end of the age, it will speak, and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come, and it will not tarry." And that's where we are today. In chapter 3, verse 1, The prophet says, verse 2, O Lord, I've heard of your speech and your warning, and I was afraid. O Lord, revive your work in the midst of the years. Save your people. In the midst of the years, make it known to your people. In your wrath, because of the transgressions and sins of this world, in wrath, remember mercy. These things are just coming upon us like a freight train thundering down the railroad track, and time is drawing short, brethren. And time is drawing shorter and shorter. And that's what these blood-red moons signify today, and several other prophecies that tie in with them, which I want to discuss today. Let's see, before I get right into that, another evidence that we are entering the dark days of the end times is a look at the American stock market today. The stock market today is way up, which gives a lot of people a feeling of comfort that, well, things must be pretty good, because look at that stock market. It's just going up and up and up, setting records. Well, Wayne Allen Root with Liberty Digest, or Personal Liberty, asks a question, is everybody asleep at the switch? Is everybody stuck in la-la land? Is everybody delusional and detached from reality, just like our president? Is everybody whistling past the graveyard? Because he says a major stock market correction is in our future. He says, doesn't anybody on Wall Street read the news? Security experts warn a terrorist attack on American soil appears imminent, and the federal government agreed. Yet the stock market still sits at all-time highs. There's a disconnect somehow. Where would the terrorists come from? He says, our southern border with Mexico is wide open for anyone to walk across. What's the excuse for that? It's an open invitation to our enemies. It's like Obama's withdrawing the troops from the border deliberately on purpose because, according to him, we don't need them there. Well, is that because of stupidity, ignorance, or because of traitorous, treasonous conduct? Some people think it's treason. What's happening to America today? Wayne Allen Root says, our border is under siege. Barack Obama has no strategy to stop or even slow down the invasion of America by desperate, poor masses expecting billions of dollars in welfare from the cradle to the grave. Just the cost of educating the new illegal children in this school year is more than $700 million, and our government $17 trillion in debt already. Says, where will the money come from? Well, as long as the pipe dream continues, it's going to come out of thin air. The printing presses of the Federal Reserve. As long as people believe and have faith in this Pollyanna world, before the black hour comes and the crisis falls upon us. Says Wayne Allen Root, the stock market sits at all-time highs, but our unsecured southern border with Mexico could bring more than just terrorism. Ebola also is spiraling out of control in the world. World health experts say quietly they are preparing for an Ebola pandemic, infecting as many as 100,000 people. If it reaches American shores, the resulting panic could overwhelm the healthcare system, shut down commerce, and close schools. Yet the stock market remains at an all-time high. Says Wayne Allen Root, the situation in the Ukraine and Europe has just gotten much worse. There are now over 20,000 Russian troops at the border of the Ukraine. NATO has proved with satellite imagery that Russia has physically entered the Ukraine. The invasion has already begun. Despite that, the stock market sits at all-time highs. European Union leaders and military experts are publicly warning that this could be that we are now headed toward World War III. It was a crisis in Eastern Europe that launched World War I, and another crisis in Eastern Europe that launched World War II, when Germany invaded Poland. And now we have another crisis in Eastern Europe and the Ukraine. And this could bring about World War III. Well, that's very worrisome, but amazingly, the stock market just goes on to all-time highs. The war between Israel and Hamas in the Gaza Strip may have been a precursor of worse things to come. That also could lead to an explosion in World War III. But the stock market pays no attention, just keeps going up. Then Wayne Allen Root says ISIS is a game changer. ISIS is perhaps the biggest threat America has faced since Nazi Germany, and our president admits he has no strategy to combat this threat to our very existence. His hands aren't tied. It just means he doesn't know what to do. And despite that, the stock market is still at an all-time high. Then there's the economy, he says. Our economy is in shatters. Every billion-dollar company in America is plotting to leave the country, set up headquarters outside the country. Burger King has already moved its headquarters to Canada because of the onerous tax rate in America. Wayne Allen Root calls it a jailbreak. Everyone in corporate America wants out of Obama's America. Thousands, 10,000s perhaps, of high-income individuals are renouncing their American citizenship today. More corporations and wealthy citizens are running for the door, leaving the country. So then where will our tax money come from? Yet, he says, the stock market remains at an all-time high. And who's going to pay our staggering debt of $18 trillion? $7 trillion of that's been added just since Obama took office. About $1 trillion a year. 1/3 of America is now on welfare, he says. Yet the stock market sits at all-time highs. 92 million working-age Americans are now not in the workforce. Since Obama became president, 11 million working-age Americans have left the workforce. 20% of American families don't have a single member of the family who is employed with a job. Yet there's that stock market sitting up there in la-la land, all-time highs. U.S. jobs pay 20% less now than they did back in 2008. The average annual wage now is $47,000, whereas in 2008 it was $61,000. That's $93 billion in lost wages. And the net assets of the average American household today, the net assets are down by 1/3 since 2003, almost half since 2007. Small businesses in America are in crisis mode, yet the stock market is sitting at record highs. There is no economic recovery in America. That's just government propaganda. He says home sales just plunged again for the 10th month in a row. Retail sales are stuck in quicksand. Obamacare has caused health insurance premiums to rise more since it started than in the 8 previous years all combined together. This is all terrible news. It's like Jeremiah said, a time of trouble. It's like Daniel was told, a time unlike any other time in history. It's like Christ himself said, a time of great tribulation, such as the world has never seen. We are plunging there as if it was a Disneyland ride, like we were in a roller coaster, strapped in, locked in. We can't control it. In the face of all of this, Wayne Allen Root says, all of this is based on one thing. The Federal Reserve is being forced to keep printing fake money so that Wall Street and stock investors can get rich on the misery of the rest of us. They just keep churning out the money, putting it in the banks, giving them certificates or little data marks on their computers, the so-called electronic deposits. You know what an electronic deposit is? It's just a notation. It's thin air, but it's because they have the authority. They just say, well, I hereby give you $1 billion. So just mark it as an electronic transfer, and now everybody says, well, look, we got $1 billion. It's just a notation on a cyber machine. But everybody thinks it's real money. How long will this shell game continue? How long will this Ponzi scheme last? It can't go on forever, and yet the stock market stays at all-time highs. Added up, Wayne Allen Alan Root says, add it all up and delusion abounds. Investors are ignoring history. Danger signals are flashing like never before. America is in severe trouble. The middle class consumers are in shambles. But the stock market just keeps rising up to the heavens. He says, we've all seen this story before. It never ends well. The stock market crash of 1929 led to the Great Depression. There was the great tulip bubble in Holland in history, where the tulip investments went crazy until they just collapsed. Common sense ought to tell us, and he says common sense tells me that this time isn't any different. We're just in another tulip bubble craze, right before the bottom falls out. My gut instincts, he says, are now at DEFCON level. DEFCON level means it's time for the missiles to launch. I suspect that we are one black swan event away from either a devastating stock market crash or a long-term deep decline. I don't know when it'll come, he says. No one can predict that. But you know, it may well be that God has given us the prediction. God himself tells us through the heavenly signs. The blood-red tetrad moons and other signs in his word put together spell out for the knowing eye that these things are coming to a head, and our time, 2015, may be the trigger date. And I want to show you that today because I think the time is upon us, and Wayne Allen Root doesn't have access or knowledge of Bible prophecy. 11 commercial airliners are now missing in the nation of Libya, just days before the anniversary of 9/11. 11 commercial jet airliners are missing. Are we headed for another 9/11? Well, I think the time is here and coming. And September 4, 2014, World Watch Daily, the Koenig International News, filed a report, an article. And he says, 4 blood-red total lunar eclipses will fall on Passover and Sukkot in 2014 and 2015. The same back-to-back occurrences occurred in 1492, the year Columbus sailed the ocean blue, 1948, the year Israel became a born-again state or nation, and 1967, the year of the Six-Day War. Acts chapter 2 and verse 20 lays the groundwork and says, the sun shall be turned into darkness, and the moon into blood, before the great and notable day of the Lord comes. Well, that would indicate that if I'm right, the day of the Lord is going to follow these blood-red moons. They are predicting and leading up to the day of God's intervention, called the day of the Lord in Bible prophecy. In Zephaniah, Well, first, in the prophecy of Joel, chapter 2, chapter 1. Joel says, chapter 1 of the book of Joel, verse 15, Alas for the day of the Lord is at hand. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty. Is not the food cut off before our eyes, joy and gladness from the house of our God? The seed shrivels up under the clods. Storehouses are in shambles. The animals groan. The grain has withered. And chapter 2 of Joel says, verse 1, Blow the trumpet in Zion, in America and in Israel. Sound an alarm in my holy mountain. Let the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of the Lord is coming. It is at hand, a day of darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, like morning clouds spread upon the mountains. He talks about a great army attacking during this day of the Lord. A people come great and strong, the like of whom has never been, nor will there ever be any such after them, even for many successive generations. A fire devours before them, and behind them a flame burns. The land is like the Garden of Eden in front of them, And behind them, though, it's like a desolate wilderness. Surely nothing will escape them. That's talking about the destruction, the warfare, World War III, which is right ahead of us today, staring us in the face, staring the world in the face. And turn over to the book of Zephaniah now. Zephaniah chapter 1, verse 14. The word of the Lord came to Zephaniah, the son of Cushi, the son of Gedaliah, in the days of Josiah, son of Amon, king of Judah. Verse 14 says, "The great day of the Lord is near. It is near and hastens quickly. The noise of the day of the Lord is bitter. There the mighty men shall cry out. That day is a day of wrath, a day of trouble and distress, a day of devastation and desolation, darkness and gloominess, a day of clouds and thick darkness, a day of trumpet and alarm against the fortified cities and the high towers." And God says, "I will bring distress upon men, and they shall walk like blind men, because they've sinned against the Lord. Their blood shall be poured out like dust, and their flesh like refuse, like garbage." The day of the Lord is coming, a day of destruction. And then the book of Haggai, the prophet of Haggai, chapter 2, God says, verse 20, "The word of the Lord came again to Haggai on the 24th day of the month, saying, I will shake heaven and earth. I will overthrow the throne of kingdoms. I will destroy the strength of the Gentile kingdoms. I will overthrow the chariots and those who ride in them. The horses and their riders shall come down, every one by the sword of his brother." These things are coming upon the world with a vengeance. And the blood-red moons are a sign that this is about to occur. They're a sign from God in heaven. It says Koenig's International Newsletter, 7 back-to-back blood-red moons have fallen on the first day of Passover in Sukkot, with the 8th time coming in 2014 and 2015. Research has shown that we have had blood-red moons on the first day of Passover and the first day of Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles, on back-to-back years, 2 years in a row, 7 times since 1 AD, or since the coming of Christ. 3 of these occurrences were connected by the year 1492, the first year of the Spanish Inquisition, 1948, statehood for Israel, and the War of Independence for Israel, and 1967, the Six-Day War. And these are some of the most significant dates in Jewish history. The other blood-red moon tetrads occurred in 162-163 AD, 795 and 796 AD, 842 and 843 AD, and 860 and 861 AD. Those latter times were the times of the Muslim expansion and conquest and persecution of the Jews in the Middle East. In all 8 of these examples, the eclipses have fallen on, or will fall on, the first day of Passover and Sukkot. The next occurrence of this, the 8th one, and 8 is God's number that means a new beginning. 8 signifies new beginnings. Like the 8th day of the week is Sunday, which is the beginning of another week. When the new world began after Noah's flood, the deluge, there were 8 people in the ark who were saved to begin the new world. 8's a symbol of new beginnings. So this next tetrad of 2014 and 15 is the 8th one, which signifies a new beginning, or the end of this age and the beginning of a new age, the age of the Messiah. So what does the period from 2013 to 2015 portend for Israel and the world, he says? I think it's leading up the prelude to the Great Tribulation. I'm going to skip on from here to what I mentioned. I think it was last week I got into this a little bit about this blood red moon on Sukkot 2015. If you count back 65 years, it brings you to the blood red moon of 1950, of the second year of the blood red moon tetrad after the War of Jewish Independence. That occurred in the fall of 1950, and you add 65 years to that, and it brings you to the blood red moon of 2015. Now, what does that have any significance? Well, as I mentioned last week, I think it does. Look in Isaiah chapter 8, or chapter 7 rather. Isaiah chapter 7 talks about the land of Ephraim, God's people, the nation of Ephraim, which as I show in my new book on America and Great Britain in Heraldry and Prophecy, that modern-day Ephraim is the United States of America. You can prove that we are the descendants as a whole of ancient Ephraim. The Anglo-Saxon people in America are Ephraimites in biblical language. And this is a prophecy here in Isaiah chapter 7 of the land of Ephraim. And Isaiah says, verse 5, chapter 7, because Syria, and Syria is much in the news today, Ephraim, America, the United States, and the son of Remaliah have plotted evil against you, against God, against the Jews, against Israel, the land of Israel, then it is a fact that Barack Obama is an anti-Semite, anti-Israelite, pro-Arab, pro-Muslim, identified member of the Muslim Brotherhood, either a member of or a ally of the Muslim Brotherhood. He's been building them up, sending them arms in secret deals. And God says, they say, let us go up against Judah, that is the Jews, and trouble it, cause trouble to the Jews in Israel. And let us make a gap in its wall for ourselves and put a king over them that we want. Replace Netanyahu with someone who will be compliant with our wishes. Thus says the Lord God, verse 7, it shall not stand, nor shall it come to pass. The head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin. Within 65 years, Ephraim, the United States, will be broken. Verse 8, in my margin says literally shattered. Shattered. America will be shattered, so that it will not be a people or a united people. The head of Ephraim is Samaria, or America. And he says, if you will not believe, surely you shall not be established. These things are going to happen. Now, what is this mysterious 65 years? Dealing with the fate of America, Ephraim. That at the end of this 65 years, we will be broken, shattered. The signs are blazing away. The red lights are flashing. The train is hurtling down the tracks. As I said, from the warning of the blood red moons after Israeli independence, the blood red moon second year of warning was 1950. You add 65 years to that warning, you come to the blood red moon of 2015. Coming up next year, on the first day of Sukkot, 2015, Passover and Sukkot, the blood red moon, the second year of the final tetrad of blood red moons for this century. The final one. And Ephraim will be broken, shattered, the marginal rendering says. And as I said last week, Isaiah chapter 17 goes on and says, verse 3, the fortress, that means the military power, the fortress, the strength, also will cease from Ephraim. America will lose its power to influence the world, to restrain the world, to restrain violence. We will become like a marshmallow. The fortress will cease. That implies our economy will not support our war-making ability. Verse 4 says, in that day it shall come to pass, the glory of Jacob, the glory of America will wane, or fade away. The fatness of his flesh shall grow lean, with drought and flood, economic collapse, or fatness grows lean. It shall be as when the harvesters gather the grain, and reaps the heads with his arm, and gathers heads of grain in the valley of death, the valley of Ephraim, the walking dead. Yet gleaning grapes will be left in it, just a few here and a few there, like the shaking of an olive tree. 2 or 3 olives left at the top of the uppermost bough, 4 or 5 in the most fruitful branches. So says the God of Israel. Now that's just the first part of this proof that we're entering these days. And the final proof I want to talk about is the mystery of the Shemittah. The Shemittah year is the year of sabbatical release. It's portrayed and explained in Leviticus chapters 25, where God says to his people, "Speak to the children of Israel and say to them, when you come into the land which I give you, the land shall keep a Sabbath to the Lord. 6 days you shall sow your seed. In 6 years you shall sow your seed. In 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather the fruit. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of solemn rest for the land, a Sabbath to the Lord. You shall neither sow your field nor reap your vineyard. For whatever grows of its own, that you shall not reap, nor gather the grapes, for it is a year of rest for the land. And the Sabbath produce of the land shall be food for you, your male and female, servants, your hired man, and the stranger that dwells with you. For your livestock and the beasts that are in your land, all of its produce should just be for food, not for selling. And you shall count 7 Sabbaths of years, every 7th year, 7 times 7, to the number of 49 years, and then sound the trumpet of the Jubilee to sound on the 50th year, and celebrate the year of release, or the year of Jubilee. Now what does that have to do with America? Well, in his brand new book, Jonathan Cahn, The Mystery of the Shemittah, points out a shocking discovery that the 5 great economic crashes in America, in the world, in the last 40 years, the economic crash of 1973, 1980, 1987, 2001, and 2008, every one of those occurred on a Shemittah year, every 7th year of the cycle. The years God set apart as Sabbath years, years of rest for the land. In his earlier book on the Harbinger, Cahn pointed out that in 2001 and 2008, the Shemittah years coincided with the collapse of the American economy, great economic collapse that occurred after the twin trade towers were struck in 2001, and then the Wall Street debacle in 2008. And these crashes occurred at the end of the Shemittah years. Those were Shemittah years, and the actual crash occurred on Elul 29, the last day of the year, the Hebrew fall-to-fall year, the day before Tishri 1, which is the beginning of a new Hebrew calendar year, the fall-to-fall reckoning. What does all this mean? Jonathan Cahn sums it up by saying, America is progressing toward God's judgment. The Shemittah year was set aside for a blessing for the nation of Israel. The Shemittah year, like the weekly Sabbath, is to be a time of rest for the land and society. There would be no sowing or reaping. God would provide food for his people. It's to bring us close to God and give us a chance to get back in touch with God and take a yearly sabbatical for spiritual purposes. The land rests and we devote ourselves to serve God on the 7th year. But Rabbi Jonathan Cahn pointed out also if the Shemittah year was not observed by Israel, then it became a curse, as described in Leviticus chapter 25. And that's what happened. Israel in the ancient times did not observe the Shemittah year. And so God took them into captivity in 586 BC by Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. And they were in captivity for 70 years. And 70 years equals the number of Shemittah years that they had failed to observe during the time of Judah's existence. They had not kept the Shemittah year. They'd missed 70 of them, and so they were taken into captivity for 70 years. Kahn explains that the word Shemittah in the Hebrew means release. However, it also means to fall, to collapse, or to shake. So what happened in 2001, the year of the Shemittah year, because America had not repented, God allowed a great economic crash to occur and our borders to be invaded by the foreign jihadists and the collapse of the Twin Trade Towers in 2001. You can read about that prophecy fulfilled in the book The Harbinger. So 2001 was a great economic collapse and crash, coinciding with the Shemittah year. 7 years later was a Shemittah year, 2008, when Wall Street collapsed and Lehman Brothers went out of business, and that propelled Barack Obama into the White House as they laid the collapse at the feet of George Bush, the president, during the time of that collapse. And that helped cement the election of Barack Obama. Well, now we're coming up to 7 years from the time of that Shemittah year collapse. This coming year will be the Shemittah year of 2014 to 2015. So as Rabbi Jonathan Kahn says, he discovered in his studies the stunning fact that the 9/11 terrorist attack ties in with Isaiah chapter 9 verse 10. And he found out that 100% of the worst U.S. economic calamities since World War II have all lined up with the Shemittah year, the biblical Sabbath year. But more than that, he says, Joseph Farrar says, of all the great economic crashes in U.S. history, including the Great Depression, all of those great economic crashes line up with Shemittah years. Says Rabbi Kahn, it has been affecting everything in our lives. There's no end to it. It's amazing. It's precise. It's down to the days, the hours, the minutes, even the seconds. You know, this is, to my mind, a phenomenal revelation. That all these economic collapses in the 20th century have occurred on Shemittah years. Joseph Farrar says this is one of the scariest things I've ever read. If the Harbinger got your attention, the mystery of the Shemittah will have you on your face praying. Well, I hope so. I've ordered my copy, and Amazon.com says it's on the way. It's already a bestseller, and it just went on sale last week. And it's already number 8 on the Amazon list. And it's number 1 among prophetic books list. Going back in history, in 1931, there was a solar eclipse that took place on September 12, the end of a Shemittah year. 8 days later, England abandoned the gold standard, setting off market crashes and bank failures around the world. It also ushered in the greatest month-long stock market percentage crash in Wall Street history, 1931. The shocks reverberated around the world at the end of that Shemittah year. In 1987, a solar eclipse took place on September 23. Again, it was the end of a Shemittah year. Less than 30 days after that came Black Monday, the greatest percentage crash in Wall Street history. Black Monday, 1987. If I recall right, the stock market fell 560 points in one day. And because of the size of the market, It was actually the greatest percentage crash in Wall Street history. So what does this mean for the next Elul 29, the end of the next Shemittah year, which will be September 13, 2015? We're already in September 6, 2014, so that's 1 year from now will be the end of the Shemittah year that begins this fall and terminates Elul 29, which is September 13, 2015. Well, Rabbi Kahn says, in the past, this ushered in the worst collapses in Wall Street history. What will it bring this time? Again, as before, the phenomenon does not have to manifest at the next convergence, but at the same time, and again, it is wise to take note. It is wise to consider this and to be prepared, to take steps to protect your assets. That's what I add. Don't just take note, but do something about it. Get ready financially. Kahn says the Jubilee year was sort of like a super Shemittah year. You had 7 Shemittah years in a row, then the following year, the 50th year, was a Jubilee year, a year of true liberty. That took the Shemittah, he says, to a new level. In the year of the Shemittah, the land rested, and also in the year of the Jubilee. In the year of the Shemittah came release, but in the year of Jubilee, the release took on new meaning. It was not just the letting go of land or debt. In the Jubilee, slaves and prisoners were set free. It was truly, therefore, the year of liberty. Concerning the Shemittah year, Kahn says, quote, from the 40-year period beginning in 1973, every single one of the 5 greatest financial and economic peaks and collapses have converged, clustered, and taken place according to the set time of the Shemittah. The 5 greatest financial peaks and collapses, beginning in 1973. 1973, 1980, 1987, 2001, and 2008. That's 7. Or that's 5. Something very much more than just natural is indeed going on, says Kahn. The signs of the phenomenon all point to the same ancient biblical mystery. If the collapse of the world stock markets were an act of crime, the Shemittah would have long ago been indicted for the evidence that left at the crime scene. In its numbers, its connections, its convergences, its percentages, its magnitude, and its consistency, the amount of fingerprints covering the financial cataclysms of modern times is overwhelming. It's an overwhelming message. It's an overwhelming reality statement. Says Rabbi Kahn, the phenomenon may manifest itself in one cycle and not in another, and then again in the next. The focus of the message is not date setting, but the call of God to repentance and return. At the same time, something of significance could take place, and it is wise to note the times. But real wisdom says, take warning and return and repent. As Solomon says in Proverbs chapter 22, verse 3, a prudent man foresees the evil, he says, and hides himself, protects himself. But the simple-minded just pass on and they're punished. They take no regard. They don't pay attention. They don't take note. They just go on their merrily down the stream and plunge over the waterfall. They're punished. In Proverbs 27, verse 12, also says, a prudent man foresees the evil. He foresees what's coming and hides himself, protects himself, his assets. The simple-minded, naive person passes on and is punished, suffers the consequences. And Proverbs chapter 29 also warns in verse 18, where there is no revelation, no prophetic vision or understanding, the margin says, the people cast off restraint. They go crazy. But happy is the one who keeps the law of God. Happy is the one who hears the warning of God and repents and turns back to God in time before the calamity strikes. Proverbs chapter 1 gives us a warning and says that God calls out to us to change our ways and repent while there's still time. Proverbs 1 verse 20 says, wisdom calls aloud outside in the streets. She raises her voice in the open square. She cries out in the chief concourses, the top of the walls, and speaks her words and says, how long, you simple ones, you naive people, will you love your naivety? How long will you go on being naive and foolish? For scorners delight in their scorning and laughing at the revelation, the truth. And fools hate knowledge, the knowledge of God, the knowledge of prophecy. They pay no attention. God says, verse 23, turn at my rebuke. Turn while there's time. Surely I will pour out my spirit on you and make my words, warnings known to you. But because I've called out to you and you refused to listen, I've stretched out my hand to you, he says to Israel, but no one regarded me, because you disdained and ignored, scoffed at all my counsel, and would have none of my rebuke. You wouldn't listen to me. Therefore God says in verse 26, I will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when your terror comes. When your terror comes like a storm, because you hated knowledge and you did not choose the fear of the Lord. He says, the complacency of fools will destroy them, but whoever listens to me will dwell safely and will be secure without fear of evil. So brethren, let's listen to God's words and take warning and return to Him, the giver of every good and perfect gift, and He will take care of us. Praise and bless His name. Amen.